Hello, welcome to the fourth session of Wallet Wisdom. We're glad you are here with us today. My name is Julie Smith, and I'm a Family Resource Management Extension Agent from the Wildcat District, which is in the southeast corner of the state, and I serve Crawford, Montgomery, Labette, and Wilson counties, and I'll be your host today. Next slide. Okay, so Kansas State University is an affirmative action equal opportunity employer. The series today is brought to you by the K-State Research and Extension Family Resource Management Program Focus Team. Our programs are open to all, and we do not discriminate against any of these protected classes. Next slide. Kansas State University is part of the land grant system, which has a three-part mission of education, research, and extension. K-State Research and Extension being the extension or outreach part of that mission provides resources and educational programming to empower residents and communities across the state of Kansas. We do have offices in every county of the state. Some counties have gone together to form extension districts. Like I mentioned, I work for Wildcat. These are indicated on the map. Your local office can be found by going to the URL on this slide, and it's also posted in the chat, and you can click on your county to find your local office. A couple of things before we get started. First, we are recording. Names and/or appearances of persons will be captured in recordings. We understand that financial matters are personal. So any questions that you ask in the chat feature can only be seen by the host. I would ask that you send those questions to me, Julie Smith, and I will ask the questions to the presenter without using your name. And we'll keep everything confidential. So today's topic looks at increased savings. This is the fourth of our Wallet Wisdom series. We've included a list of dates and topics we will be covering during the 6-week series for you to mark your calendars. You can join us for as many as you're able or interested in. These programs will be recorded, so if you have to miss a week, you can come back and catch them later. We will also be sending out the PowerPoints, additional links and resources, and a link to the recording after each week's workshop. Next slide. So the information provided in this session does not and is not intended to constitute financial advice. Instead, all of the information, content, and materials presented are for general, informational, and educational purposes only. We do understand that everyone's financial situation is different. There's no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to personal finance. This series of programs is not intended to be a substitute for personalized financial advice. And now, getting to the good stuff. Whoops, where did I lost you for a minute. I'd like to introduce to you today our presenter, Gary Fike. He is the County Extension Director in Riley County, Kansas. He has 23 years of extension experience in Kansas, Iowa, and Ohio as a County Extension Agent, County Director, Area Beef Cattle Specialist, and State Extension Associate. He also worked for 15 years in the beef industry as a beef cattle specialist for Certified Angus Beef, and was a director of commercial marketing for the Red Angus Association of America. He holds a BS degree in agricultural education from Oklahoma Panhandle State and a Master of Science from Kansas State University. Most recently, he's joined us as a family resource management agent, offering programming in household budgeting, saving, investing, and debt reduction in Riley County. He's also the state coordinator for Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program and prepares tax returns for low to moderate income clients in Kansas. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you very much, Julie. I appreciate that so much. I'm excited to be here today, and I know that people, you might have a lot of questions, so be sure and get into the chat and ask the questions, and we'll handle those as we go along. And Julie or Monica or Elizabeth, whoever needs to probably stop me once in a while, because I'll have a tendency to just roll when I get to talking. So let's please make this as interactive as possible. You know, the title of the Zoom conference today is Increasing Savings. But first, I think there's a lot of things that we have to consider. These are going to be pretty philosophical in nature, but we'll get down to more brass tacks as we move through this. But I think you need to take a look first at what is my current savings? How much do I have saved now? And for what? Do I have money saved for emergency, for living expenses, for vacations, for retirement? How much do I have saved in each one of those things now? And what is my age? My outlook on retirement and other things is a lot different at age 25 than it is at age 55. What is my income and how much can I save? What percentage of my income do I think I can save? And marital status. And I'll talk here and there about marital status and about communication in a marriage or in a partnership, because oftentimes within a marriage or a partnership, you've often got one that's a saver and one that's a spender. It's rare to have both the same. So that'll be something else we'll talk about a little bit. And then a lot of people have different things they need to worry about. If you have a lot of health issues and you have to spend more money on medical expenses, doctor bills, and those kinds of things, I think you need to take that into consideration as well. Kids, dependents are something else that affects obviously how much you can save and when. And then what are my goals for retirement, for home ownership, for college education for my kids, for entertainment value during the year? You know, as we're often reminded, you do need to spend some money for entertainment at some point along the road. So how does this all play into how much can I save and for what? Secondly, what does my non-mortgage debt look like? And can you imagine life without debt? Because if you've got a lot of debt, it becomes very difficult to save more. And can I meet a $1,000 emergency if I have the alternator blow up on my car, or the starter, or I have a sudden emergency in a medical bill or something, or a deductible on insurance that comes up? Do I have 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses saved in case somebody loses their job? If your income is cut by a third or a half, do I have enough money saved there? I think something that is probably as important as anything, and to start at a very young age, is, am I taking full advantage of a 401k, 403b, Roth IRA, or other retirement savings opportunities? In the olden days, a lot of companies had pensions, and so you had a pension plus Social Security. That's a very rare thing anymore. If you've got that, congratulations. But if you don't, then it's pretty much up to you and your employer for whatever they're contributing towards your retirement in terms of a 401k or other investment vehicle there. You need to take a really hard look at that. And then everyone's got a different walk. That's what I like to refer to as walking, you know, a mile in another person's shoes, because we all have different things going on in our lives. And that will affect too how much we can save and what our monthly expenses are. I blew right through the question. So Monica, if you want to go back to the poll, this would be a great time to put that in.
So everybody should be able to see now of the participants that completed it. About 46% said yes, they have an emergency savings, but they don't feel like it's enough. 23% said they do not have savings at all. And 4 participants said yes, they're either comfortable with the amount or they think they have enough.
Very good. Very good. I think it's probably not surprising to me to see that most people say yes, but I don't feel like it's enough, because you're always worried about having enough for whatever it is, whether it's for retirement, emergency fund, or living expenses. So I'm going to close that, or Monica, do you need to do that, I guess?
Each host will have to close their own. So go ahead
Okay.
and close it now.
Good deal. Okay, so for those of you who don't feel like you've saved enough, or for those of you who don't have anything in savings, the one thing I want to offer is hope. There's always time to do that. And there's really, it's very simple. It's a very simple process. My dad used to always tell me, he says, you just don't spend more than you make. So the two ways that you save more is you spend less on the current dollars you own now, or that you control now, or increase income, or arguably both. So it's a simple concept, right? Save more, you spend less, or you increase your income. But in all reality, it's very hard to do. And we'll talk about some of those things and why it's hard later on, but we know that surprises come up and things happen. And pretty soon you find out you've got a whole bunch of expenses you weren't counting on. That's where the emergency money should come in handy when we talk about that. But it's very difficult to implement. So it's time to make a plan. And there's a couple of these things that were probably covered on the financial check sheet that we did in the very first session. You really need to sit down, and if you're married or have a partner, you need to sit down and decide what you've got for debts and assets and make up a net worth statement. It's simply a listing of all the tangible assets that you have versus the debt you hold on your mortgage, if you have one, on car loans, on student loans, all those kinds of things. And then secondly, you need to look at your household income and expenses and look at your debt to income ratio. And that is your gross income, not your net income, but your gross income, and then how much you're spending on other debt payments. If you're looking to buy a house at some point in time, bankers will look really, really hard at your debt to income ratio, which should be about 36%. Now, they will go up to maybe 42 or 43%, but that's kind of crowding the edge because of all the other things that you've got going on, all the other bills you have to pay, utilities and trash and water and all those kinds of things, car insurance and those kinds of things. So we don't really want to get too high above that 36% if we're looking at buying a house. And the house actually shouldn't be any more than 28% of your gross income per month. So those are some of the things that you need to think about before you explore purchasing a house or just looking at your overall financial health. Check your credit. We do have a program through that offered by K-State, Family Resource Management. A credit score really is nothing more than something that says you're really good at paying debt or you're really lousy at paying back debt. Sometimes it just gives lenders the opportunity to say, okay, you're a great credit risk, you always pay your debts back. But on the other hand, sometimes you may have a lot of debt, but you're just really good about paying all of your bills, but you don't have enough money left over to save. What if I lose my job? What are we going to do then? And that's where the 3 to 6 months comes in, and that's what we save for on that. And the most important thing is, if you are married or if you have a life partner, the most important thing is to communicate everything with each other and don't hold secrets, because finances can be one of the leading causes of issues in a marriage and often is in divorces. And that's something that you need to think about and sit down and openly talk about that. Some people don't like to talk about finances because it often ends up in arguments, but it's better to get things out in the open and understand what's going on in your financial life. The net worth statement, as I alluded to earlier, you need to take into account all of those hard assets that you have, whether it's your house, if you own some land, real estate, maybe a rental property. And it even includes paid for vehicles, what money you do have in savings now, what money you've got in retirement, and all other hard assets or assets that are tangible. Your debts would include your mortgage, student loan balances, credit card debt, car loans, personal loans, other things that you hold that you're indebted to somebody else for. The debt to income ratio that I talked about earlier, here's a simple example. If your monthly gross household income is $4,000 a month, and you're paying $1,000 a month in credit card payments, a $600 car payment, a $350 loan payment, or any mix thereof, I just threw these numbers out, that's $1,950 divided by 4,000, then you're looking at a debt to income ratio of 48%, and that's going to be too high to qualify for a mortgage loan. So this is a case where we need to think about reducing debt or restructuring some things there, because we've got all of these other bills we got to pay. Renee did a great job last week of talking about spending plans and budgets, but remember, you've got electricity bills, you've got natural gas or propane, water, trash, internet, cell phones, vehicles, insurance, and all those other things that we haven't accounted for in the debt to income ratio. And it becomes very difficult to save any money at all if all of your money is already spoken for. So you have to start making that savings a priority. So how do I save when I can't meet my current obligation? Well, honestly, we're in a spend society, consumerism. I think people are doing a little bit better job, I think now the last year or so, with the pandemic, because we simply couldn't get out. But as things begin to open up, I think we're going to see spending increase if we haven't already seen that. And again, Renee covered this last week, but a spending plan or a budget, nobody likes that word. And they don't like that word because it implicates that it involves discipline. And nobody wants to be disciplined, right? So what you want to do is do the pay yourself first mindset. And part of that budget is putting aside at least every pay period, 10 to 15%. And it's easier to do that if you make automatic transfers. And most everyone has electronic banking. If you don't, you should really look into it. Making automatic transfers from your checking account after you get paid into your savings account, even if it's only 5% or 3%, make some commitment there to help save for your emergency fund if you don't have. And if you've already got that fully funded, then you probably need to start thinking about making those transfers over for your 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses so that you can handle those expenses in case somebody does lose their job. I will interject a little bit here and say that if your job is very stable, if you're not worried about job loss, you can probably get by with 3 months. But if you're in a position where you're a little bit worried about how the economy is affecting your particular job situation, then 6 months would probably be better. And the older you get, the more difficult it becomes to find that job. At least you can make a sideways move in from an income standpoint. So the older you are, probably in some cases, the larger that should probably be. And that money should just be in a passbook, a money market, some low interest rate account, interest bearing account, so that there's no risk involved with losing any of that principal. Monica, did we have the second poll in here? I don't remember where we interjected
No,
that.
I had it a little bit later, but I can launch it now if you're
No,
ready.
that's all right. We'll do it. Just give me a thumbs up or let me know.
Okay.
So my wife and I say this all the time to each other: want, 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 need, need, need. The balance between wants and needs: you should pay yourself first. You need to get rid of debt as quickly as you can, minus mortgage. A car payment is something I harp on all the time with my clients. Transportation is transportation. Everybody needs it, but always keep in mind that a vehicle is a depreciating asset. So you really need to consider how much money you want to contribute towards a depreciating asset. Because if you buy a car for $30,000 or $35,000, if it's brand new, You know, in 4 or 5 years, when you've got a number of miles on it, it's going to be worth about a third to a fourth of what you paid for it. Now, it's transportation. You have to have it. You're trading off money that could be appreciating somewhere else. So this is something you really need to consider about wants versus need. Do I want to drive a 2021, whatever it is, or can I get by with a 2017 or a 2012 or a 2018 rather than a 2021? Because again, you're sinking an awfully big chunk of money into an asset that does nothing but depreciate. So you have to be thinking about that. Things that are not necessary for life. Again, we're talking about wants versus needs. If you are drowning in debt and you've got a boat that you're making payments on, you've got a smartphone you're making payments on, cable TV is an expensive monthly cost. Those are things that are not necessarily necessary for everyday life. Eating out, and I think Renee talked about this last time, so I won't spend a lot of time talking about that, but you know, you go out to eat for lunch, even at McDonald's anymore, $7-8 if you get the meal deal, and you do that 3 days a week, that's $1,200 to $1,500 a year. Coffees, I had coworkers at one of my previous jobs that had to be at Starbucks every day for a $4.50 latte, and that can amount to $1,100-1,200 a year. The one I want to spend most time on, however, is if you have kids, because those choices become more difficult. I have 3, and believe me, I know kids are not planners in advance, so they seem to come up with expenses at the last moment that really can wreck a budget. It may be as little as $15 for a team football or cross country or band t-shirt, but it also may be something a lot more expensive than that. And you know, one time my son said he was in the Spanish club and they were going to take a trip to Costa Rica, but it cost this much money. And I said, where is that going to come from? You know, where does that, so are you going to get a job to pay for that? So those are teachable moments with your own kids on budgeting and trying to figure those things out instead of just spending the money when maybe you don't have a budget for that. Ways to save. Well, we talked about spending less. With the tax refunds you got, go to the bank. Stimulus payments, go to the bank. I had a number of people last year, the stock market crashed in late February, early March. If you had money in the stock market, you would know that, or even in mutual funds for retirement. A lot of people took that money and went and bought stocks. Turned out that could have been a very profitable move, but if you're drowning in debt or you got other issues going on, you really should just keep that in the bank and not worry about the risk, because you don't know what the stock market's going to do. You can't predict that in the short term. Long term, it's pretty good, but if you're doing it to try to make a bunch of money in a very short amount of time, that's not a great place. So you just need to save that and put it in the bank. Sometimes the issue is making more money, and that's part-time gigs. You can turn a hobby into something that generates income. We've talked about that before, I think, but we had a number of people through the VITA system this year that did DoorDash or Uber that made extra money, mowing the neighbors' yards, walking their dogs, doing babysitting, and those kinds of things in extra time that you have to earn more money to reduce debt or save more. You also need to check into your insurance rates. You need to do that at least annually and do some price shopping on auto insurance, your house, private mortgage insurance. If you've got 20% equity in your home, you shouldn't be paying house private mortgage insurance premiums. And you need to check with your lender on that to make sure that that is not a bill you're paying unnecessarily. When you go food shopping, make the list and stick to it. This is a dumb one. Put your change in a jar every day, every week. I was amazed when I used to travel a lot in previous jobs, how much change I would accumulate in my pocket and stick that in a bank, in a piggy bank at home, and then take that to the bank and cash that in and deposit that. If you've got an older vehicle, you probably need to look at dropping collision and comprehensive insurance on vehicles you've got totally paid off. They're not worth much. There's no sense having anything other than what the law requires, and that's liability, and take that risk yourself. Do we have any questions at this point in time?
Sorry, Gary, couldn't unmute myself. We don't have a question. I do have a comment from someone that says there are a lot of people working for minimum wage or a little more, but they don't have enough to cover their needs. And there are cases where people simply just don't make enough to save. I think you've addressed that a little bit with potentially going out for extra gigs. Anything else you would add to that?
Well, the only other thing I would add to that is there's a lot of people making minimum wage, and I don't know everybody's situation, here in Manhattan, as it is everywhere, there's a shortage of workers. So when my daughter and she was 16, worked for Dunkin' Donuts and got paid $12 an hour to make coffee and to serve people. And that was maybe 4 to 6 hours a day, maybe 6 days a week sometimes it's 4. She could work full time if she wasn't going to school and other things. So I think there's some other opportunities out there. Now, I'm not saying there's not any minimum wage jobs, but at least in our area, you can work just about anywhere for $11 to $12 an hour, which is well above minimum wage. And I think a lot of those jobs that people are making minimum wage at were never designed to be full-time jobs where you can pay all of your expenses. A lot of the fast food joints will only give you maybe a 20 or 30-hour work week because they have to provide other benefits. So if you're making $7.25 an hour, there's people that here, basically unskilled workers that are making 11 to 12. And still it'd be tough to make that depending on what all of your expenses are. So we'll go on with that. Remember that your income is your biggest wealth builder, and it's not maybe how much you make, but how much you keep. So as I just spoke about, increasing skills, looking at other opportunities, working extra jobs, doing those kinds of things, and then saving that extra money to reduce your current debt or save more. And then I worked with a guy in Iowa Extension, and he was a very frugal person. And I know a lot of frugal persons, and I know a lot of spendthrifts. But this gentleman said every time he got a raise, that raise just went automatically into savings. So he was living on old dollars, but he managed to do that and did quite well. Again, it's really about discipline and how much you can put away and how much you can live on, and the choices that you make. Saving and investing are basically two different things, and I want to talk about that for a little while. We save for purchases that are short to mid-term needs, like emergency funds, like 3 to 6 months living expenses, for college, for appreciating assets like a primary home, property, farm. And we also save for depreciating assets, saving for auto, saving for a vacation, saving for toys, whatever those things might be, things that you want to spend time with. But those are quite different than what we're saving for investing in order to build long-term wealth. And primarily, I'm talking about long-term wealth in terms of your retirement living and income. Maybe if you're considering buying a business, you're investing in a business, or maybe a rental home, or future spending needs of a lifetime. Let's say you want to go to Europe in 10 or 15 years. You can invest money there in riskier investments that will help your money grow more quickly over time. Charitable trust, giving to children, grandchildren. There's a lot of people. My father was one of them. He was saving money for us kids, so that when they passed away, that we would have some kind of an inheritance. Didn't need to do that, and I told him that, but some people want to do that and leave something for their kids. So that's another way that you might want to invest for the future, is for posterity. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those saving and investing vehicles. The investing vehicles, you need to really think about long-term stuff. Again, go back to the example I used about taking stimulus money last year and investing it in the stock market. It's probably not a good way, but long-term investment vehicles would include things like bonds, stocks, individual stocks, which are riskier than a mutual fund, which is probably the best way to invest in the stock market. Real estate investment trust, which is somewhat like a mutual fund. You invest money into a fund where other people put together real estate and you benefit from the increase in value. And you need to consider in all of these the length of time, when you're going to need the money, so on and so forth. The savings vehicles, again, is just a passbook account at your bank. There's money markets, accounts, and different funds there that you can save into. I like this pyramid that shows the return on various investments. We obviously realize that the more risk there is in the investment, the higher the potential return, and the less risk, the lower the return. We've been in a terrible situation as far as I'm concerned for saving money at the bank, because even certificates of deposit, I looked at the best rates just this morning just to update myself, and they're less than 1% on 3, 6, 12, 24-month certificates of deposit. If inflation is the last CPI, I don't know if any of you saw that, for April was way up. The stock market took a big dump on that yesterday because of that. So inflation is going to be a concern that we're going to have to worry about, I think, in 2021 and 2022. So you're not even keeping up with the rate of inflation. In other words, you're putting money in. If inflation is 3% and you're earning less than 1%, you're losing money because it's not keeping up with the rate of inflation. But it's still a safe place to park money. So I'm not dissing it. I'm just saying you're not going to get ahead on that. There's treasury bills, bonds, and notes. They all depend on how long you hold them for as to what they really are and the amount. There are fairly safe, especially in bond funds. Municipal bonds are exempt from federal and state income taxes, which is a saver. They can range anywhere from 1% to 8% depending upon how risky they are. Corporate bonds would be riskier than a government bond, but you will get a much higher return on those. Mutual funds that invest in stocks, and you can invest in the general stock market by buying index funds that follow the market, 6 to 12%. That's really fairly easy to obtain. There's thousands of funds out there that will get you that kind of return over the long term. If you buy one today, at the end of the year, it may have gone down 10%. But if you hold on to those funds for several years, you're likely to return 6 to 12%. Again, the individual stocks, they're risky if you own fewer than 10 to 15. And if you're owning 15 stocks, basically you have your own mutual fund as long as you have those investments spread out between growth stocks and income stocks. Whole life insurance policies are not a good investment as a whole. The return is very low on those. You buy life insurance for protecting your family in case of your death, but they're very expensive. It's much cheaper to use term life, which has no investment value and does have just a limited number of years, 15, 20, 25, or 30, depending on your age and what you can get. So whole life insurance policies are not a great investment. People want to invest in gold because they're afraid the economy is going to go badly. Don't buy physical gold. You can invest in gold mining stocks or gold mutual funds if you want to invest in that. That's a much safer way of investing in that. And futures markets, commodities, cryptocurrencies are not a good place necessarily to save money or invest money for the long term. Very, very risky there. Okay, I think I do have another one here on saving for retirement, Monica. We might want to go ahead and do that after I discuss this slide. How much do I think I'll need is a question you need to ask yourself. How old are you now? Again, if you're 55 or you're 25, your outlook is a lot different. So you also need to examine how much I've already saved. And generally, this is different for everybody, but what do you expect to live on after you retire? 60 to 75% of your pre-retirement income is something that you should probably think about when you're doing that. And we're going to do the math here in a little bit. So Monica, if you want to do that poll on retirement, that would be great if you wanted to do that now.
So everybody should see the shared poll results now. Looks like most everybody feels like they need to either save more for retirement, or they worry about it, but they don't dwell on it.
Okay. Well, there's some people worrying a lot and some that just don't think about it. And sometimes that's the best thing to do, actually, is if you don't dwell on it, but you still need to probably think about it and make a plan. And I've got an example here, and I want to point you to and I think Monica will put that up, or Julie will put that up in the web chat, a link called bankrate.com. And that's what I've used for several of these examples here. So let's just say we've got a married couple that's 40 years old that plans to retire at age 65. They're currently saving 15% of their income for retirement. They've currently got 100,000 already saved after working for, let's say, 18 years, 15 years. Their current household income is $100,000. And in that formula, you can put in what you expect for annual increases over time and what you want to have for your desired retirement income. Of course, the higher you go, the more it's going to tell you need to save. You've got current retirement savings of $150,000, and assuming a 7% return, that's going to be on a pretty conservative stock mutual fund, and that's going to be during your working years. And you're going to scale that back probably to less risky investments after you retire to maybe 4% return. And you expect to live, and this is the U.S. Expectancy, 87 years. So with that formula, you'll have approximately $1.8 million in 25 years with all these assumptions. And you can make your own and do your own and make your own decisions. This is simply for an illustration. With Social Security income included, you should have an income that will last for life, with still nearly $2 million in retirement assets if you live at that 70% level. So I would recommend that you take a look at that and do your own thing. Plug in your own figures. If you think you can live on less than 70% of your retirement, of your current income in retirement, plug in 60. If you think, well, I really want to take some trips, I really want to do some other things, I want to make 85%. Believe me, if your house is paid off, that takes off a big chunk of your mortgage. But if you're 60 or 62 and you have a $400,000 mortgage, that's obviously going to affect what you want to have in retirement income. So you need to think about all of those things when you consider retirement savings. And then the next thing I'm going to get into is the wonder of the eighth wonder of the world, and that's compound interest. So again, using bankrate.com, you can do this on your own. But I took two young men who are 19 years of age, just out of high school. And Joe invests $2,000 a year for 8 years, and then he never contributes another dime. Jack invests nothing for the first 8 years of his life, but then he does $2,000 a year for 38 years. Both mutual funds average 12% annually over the long term. Who has more money at age 65? Well, Joe, who stopped after 8 years, has nearly $3 million. If he continues that $2,000 a month for the rest of his life or until he retires, he'll have $4 million. Jack, on the other hand, who has invested nothing for the first 8 years, only has $1.5 million. So it's a huge difference in the outcome. And that's the power of compounding. Because once we start increasing the amount in the account and it grows over time, it becomes substantially different at the end. And here's a lesson for your kids that I'm throwing in, and you've probably seen this before. Give your kids a choice between getting $1 a month for 12 months, make this deal in January, not in November, right? Or giving them a penny in January and doubling that amount every month. Which would they rather have? Well, most kids are going to say, why would I take a penny when I can get $1, right? But if you double that amount every year, and this is compounding, at the end of the year, kid 1 has $12, kid 2 has almost $41. Now, you can put any amount in those kinds of things you want, double them every month, but the power of compounding is real. And it depends so much on the investment vehicle that you're using. And we use the rule of 72, which some of you may be familiar with also, but you just simply take the number 72 and divide that by the expected rate of return equals the number of years it takes to double your money. So a stock mutual fund that has historically returned 9%, and there's lots of them out there, you can find them, will double your money in 8 years. If you're earning 12%, as we were in the previous example, your money doubles in 6 years. Now, if you can imagine the CD rate of 0.69% a year, and you did that for 3 years, it's going to take you forever. As a matter of fact, you may not outlive that and be able to double your money on that. So when we're talking again about inflation rate and staying ahead, again, this is for long-term. I'm not talking short-term, long-term stuff. You really need to be, especially if you're young, probably looking at investments that will create a better return for you. So with that, I'm just about down to the end of my 45 minutes, and I know but we've left plenty of time for questions and discussion. But the things are here is as we go forward, all these things are things we want to talk about, think about, and hopefully we've provoked some thought here into where you're at and where you want to go. So with that, Monica and Julie, if we've got any more questions or things people want to talk about, we've got time to do that.
Okay. It looks like here's a question. How do you plan when you are in the middle of a catastrophe? My spouse has developed a medical emergency and the future is pretty dim. I would like to know how you would manage money in this situation.
Well, I'm sorry for your troubles. I know how that goes. It's very difficult to do. And the first thing I would offer is, hope this thing will work out. I don't know what your age is, and I'm not going to ask that. And that's what I alluded to on one of my earliest slides was everybody's got something different that they're dealing with. So it becomes very, very difficult. The only advice that I can offer is that when you've got a lot of issues like that, that's the first thing you have to address. And depending on what your insurance situation is, if you had a health savings account or if you've got other assets, then that's what has to be done because that's the most important thing. So if you can put a little bit aside every month and not get that attached to your medical issues or your health problems that you're facing, then you need to try to save just a little bit to try to help yourself out. It may be impossible. If you don't, you've got to address that first.
One other question, would you address how you would go about when your healthcare costs increase during retirement?
That's another big thing, and I'm personally, and we'll be looking at that myself here in a few years. And the thing that I'm looking at is probably retiring from the full-time job that I have right here, right now, and working part-time to afford that until we get on Medicare, both my wife and I. So I think that's probably what we're going to be looking at. Increasing health costs is a reality, but that's also where part of your, if you're looking at 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses, if you've got that in place, then that suddenly becomes a little bit more of your emergency money for those kinds of things for increasing health costs.
Okay, are there any other questions that you guys would want to send to me? If not, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Gary, for your presentation. And Monica will be putting a link to a short survey in the chat box. You can use the QR code here to get to the survey. It's pretty short, shouldn't take you more than a couple of minutes, and we would really appreciate the feedback to help us as we improve this program for the future. We were looking forward to seeing you all next week when we talk about debt management. Our presenter will actually be the amazing Monica Thayer. So looking forward to hearing from her next Thursday, May 20th at noon. And if you have any additional questions or would like to contact Gary, his email address is on the screen. Maybe there's a slide. And also it will be in the chat box. Thank you again, Gary, for sharing your knowledge of increasing savings. And we're looking forward to seeing you all again right here next week on Thursday at noon.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you all for joining. I really enjoyed it.